A true leader has the traits of taking care of their people because they treat their people like family. They know how important they are to the success of the business.
Hi, Mary. Welcome to Owning Your Legacy. And if you don't mind, take a minute to introduce yourself.
So Mary Wagner, and I am president of MK Wagner Associates, something I developed after I retired from Starbucks. And I'm also an independent board director on a couple different boards, public and private.
So let's start with you telling your story and kind of introducing yourself to our listeners, because you have a very lovely history.
Oh, thank you, Laurette. Oh, you're so kind. I've known you for so long.
I was thinking about that.
I know. I've been in the food industry like 40 plus years, and we've worked together years, right?
Years, at least 15, I gotta guess, but I'm totally guessing. But yeah, we got some good memories.
I don't remember exactly when we first met, but I started my career in the food industry after PhD, and that was an adventure. And then ended up in many different CPG and food service roles from General Mills.
And tell us what your PhD is in,
food science.
Food science PhD, which many of our listeners probably don't even know that is a thing. Which
I know.
Is a very cool thing.
And your background too is food
yeah,
science.
I'm definitely not a PhD, not even a master's, but yeah, I went to Purdue for food and nutrition was really officially the title of, and it was business, which was so cool. So it was called Food and Nutrition with Business.
Right.
A lot of heavy food science concentration, but I liked the combination of the two.
Yep. I think food science and nutrition, that was mine as well. So PhD in food science, and that's the study of engineering and chemistry and all the things, nutrition, all the things we all love. It's not a chef, though we wish we were.
Yes, we do.
We do. We learn that on the side, on our own, and from there, my first job was actually a professor at Wisconsin in Madison.
Where my son went.
Yes,
beautiful
I know.
school.
It's a beautiful school, and it was fabulous. So I did. I had a lab with students, graduate students, doing research. Loved it, and then I also traveled the state, and I was their food specialist for the state, which was really fun. Teaching people how to make jam and jellies and
that is
things
so
like.
funny.
Isn't that fun?
Because I worked at Ball Corporation. In home canning was my first job out of Purdue.
Really?
And I went around the country with extension agents and taught them how to make jams, jellies, pickles, and scarily pressure cooking.
Me too.
Wasn't that scary?
Totally scary. In fact, first thing to throw away when I cleaned my mother's house. Throw it away but that's what you did in extension, because my appointment was joint food science department in the state of Wisconsin. So extension. Yeah. So you did the same thing. I'm glad. So that was
it was fun.
It was fun. And you really learn what food science is about.
You do.
Because you have to teach it to the public.
And not kill people
and
while
not
you're
kill people.
Making pressure.
Exactly.
I learned a lot from that job.
Right. And then from there, I was recruited to General Mills. And I worked at Betty Crocker, cakes, brownies, and muffins, and frosting.
Did you wear an apron?
No, I wore whites at General Mills. All the scientists wore whites, and so that's what we wore. And you'd come home at the end of the day, and you'd just be full of whatever you worked on. So
you probably smelled good.
I smelled good. So anyway, and then I was sent to Harvard I didn't want to go back to school and get an MBA, but they sent me to an accelerated program. It's called PMD, Program for Management Development. And I learned business, and I roomed they put us in groups of 6, and I was the only woman in the group of 6. There was 140 in the class, but one woman per group of 6. And we studied together, we partied together, we went to class together, we presented together. And so I did that for 3 months. Business, all kinds of business, finance, marketing.
You told me about this, I remember, years ago, and you're like, you need to do, and I still think about that, and I have always had a hard time getting away for 3 months with kids at home.
Right.
And then my son was getting looked at for football by Harvard, and I was like, Garrett, oh my God, we had a long weekend there. I loved it. And he didn't love it, and I realized that I was trying to vicariously live through my son, that I need to go to Harvard. But it's from you. You planted this seed.
I know, and you should still think about it, because I think the learning is one thing, but who you mix with is everything.
Yeah.
I mean, head of the Malaysian Defense was there. My roommates were from Sun Life in Canada. One guy was a banker. One guy's in operations in Chile. So you just expand your network, because a lot of what we do, and I'll talk about my career, is network.
Yes.
And every place I've been, you develop a new hood or a new network. So General Mills, went to Harvard, came back, ran a testing lab within General Mills, which was a P&L in technology. So we made a ton of money because it was Nutrition Labeling Education Act just came out. So everybody had to get their nutrition labels on their products, and that's what we did for General Mills people as well as external clients, customers.
So so P&L, profit and loss. So it was a business unit at General Mills that was being used to help other people externally figure out internally figure out how to label with the new laws.
Right. So what we did is actually it was a testing lab. So you would send me a product sample, and
Here's my brownie.
and I would put it through our process, and I would spit out an ingredient listing and a label. So you could then find out exactly how many calories, how much sugar, how much fiber, and we would actually put it in a format where you could just slap it on your product. And so that's what this group did, Medallion Labs. Not only did the testing, how much fat, sugar, et cetera, but we would generate a label with all that information.
Cool.
And so that was pretty valuable at the time. Other places did what we did, but we really tried to be the best. And so that was a fun time. And then I was asked to go to Gorton Seafood because that was owned by General Mills out in Boston. And they had a need for someone who'd run R&D as well as quality. And I'm sure the list was very short. Maybe one, maybe two, I don't know. But
Right.
I just gotten married and we moved out to Boston. And I was head
Back
of
in
R&D.
Harvard world.
Back at the Harvard world, but running R&D quality engineering for Gorton Seafood. And we were there almost 5 years. So did a lot of innovations, and it was a lot of fun living in Boston,
Yeah, I love
North
Boston.
up in Gloucester.
You've lived in lovely places.
Really have. Been very fortunate. So after several years, I answered a recruiter call. Someone called, like they do. As they do when you're in the world of food or other businesses, and asked if I would consider moving to Yum Brands, which at the time was Tricon, to head up R&D, quality, food engineering, packaging for Taco Bell. So my husband and I moved to Southern California. And
Across the country.
Across the country, and went into food service, which I didn't know that well. It's different than CPG, which is consumer packaged goods, which is like Betty Crocker cake mix. Once you go to food service, you're dealing with a much faster development pace, as you know.
Yes.
Because you go from 18 months to develop a product to 9 months or less in food service. Food service is restaurants, and
Right.
Taco Bell was like a restaurant. We called it food service. It's fast service. You come in, you order. It's pretty cheap or inexpensive compared to
Right.
sit-down restaurants.
And more innovative on the menu. Like you can do some limited time offers every
Correct.
once in a while.
Limited time offers, and that's a good. So if people don't know, when you walk in and go, "How come I can't get that? I just had that last month." We call that limited time offer because you just come out and then you take it out, and it develops a crave for people to look forward to it in the future. But it can't sustain on a menu full time because something else would have to come off.
Right.
Because
it cannibalizes something
cannibalizes
else.
something else, and it creates a whole nother work stream for the crew, people who build the product on the line.
So you had to learn about that, I would imagine.
So
a
that's
lot of
you
that.
really had to learn about that, and we didn't really do that in
School.
or in packaged goods, because packaged goods, you made the product in a factory, got it in a box, and then you never saw it again because off it goes to be distributed. In food service, you actually work with suppliers as well, but you go through product or ingredients so quickly. It's just a different world. So that was fun.
Any favorite products that came out of your Yum time that you were a
Yes,
part of?
we did the chalupa,
The chalupa.
grilled stuffed burrito, all your favorite foods, grilled steak taco. We put fryers and grills in all the stores, which is, there's only so much room if you look in the back of any of these places you go into for fast food, there's not a lot of room. So we figured out how to get it in there and how to make it work so food production flows.
Yeah.
Every restaurant is like a little unit of production, and they all have to work seamlessly. So we did that.
A lot of engineering in that brain.
Well, a lot of engineering in the group, which is a big part of what I've done in my life, is bring in really good people to work with. That's a secret.
That is a
right?
secret.
That's a secret. Surround yourself with the best.
Absolutely.
And make them successful.
And know what you're good at and what you need the best at in other areas.
Correct. Right. So we hired some really phenomenal people. And then they get in and then they stay either with Taco Bell or we move them to Pizza Hut, et cetera. Gives them a chance to grow too. So after Taco Bell, I got another recruiter call, and we had just adopted our first daughter and from China. So that's when my husband, we decided someone's going to stay home, and he stayed home. So that was a big change in our life. And then he really took responsibility for her, a lot of it. So I worked, and then I got a call on another position up in Northern California at Gallo Winery. So we moved from Southern California, Laguna Niguel, up to Modesto, California. Big move.
Big move.
And I started at Gallo as their chief technology officer. Again, it's R&D, viticulture, market research, product development, compliance, regulatory. And so we did that up at Gallo for 7 years.
Wine,
It was wine and
lovely.
spirits.
I would love that.
So learning that, I came from food service now, and I've been at packaged goods, but you go to wine, it's a whole nother hood or Rolodex, because it's people, hard to believe, food scientists do get hired as winemakers, but who knew? So we did, it was just me learning the business, wine is very unique, and its regulations are different because wine is made from clean, sound grapes. You can't add water, you can't add flavors. I mean, so you're very restricted to a fermentation and maybe putting it in some oak to get some flavor, but it's very restricted how you make wine. And spirits are also very restrictive because they're both alcohol based. So they're run by a different group in the government. They're taxed. A lot of things that food never is exposed to. So I had to learn that. But the fundamentals are the same. Chemistry is the same. Sensory is the same and very important.
Very important.
When you look at wine, because it's such a
We had
tiny
a group
bit of flavor.
Our Adlong group at wine tasting, and they were like, "Wow, you guys are like they didn't know that we were in the food industry. Really good tasters, and it's like this is what we do." And
yeah, and it's magical. Food science is so magical in something like wine because it lets you think about how can I make it even better. So, for instance, we knew that people who love Chardonnay, and there's a lot of people who don't like it. In fact, they don't like it at all. How could that be?
You know what's interesting? I used to love Chardonnay more, and now I lean more mineral, like
Sauvignon Blanc,
or Chablis, or
yes,
I love that like crispy mineral now.
Yeah, more unoaked because the oak treatment gives you a buttery feeling in your mouth. It changes the texture, but it also changes the flavor. A lot of vanilla.
Mouthfeel. We could talk mouthfeel forever.
I know.
Like people that aren't in our industry don't often go, "What's the mouthfeel?" But then when you show them something like that and go, "Look at the mouthfeel of a Chardonnay versus the mouthfeel of a Sancerre."
Yeah. Or a Chablis. It's totally, wow, it's so different.
Yeah.
So really,
Do you spit when you taste wine?
Good question. Yes, you do. In fact, when we would do sensory profiling, we would have consumers come in with us to taste, and we would give everybody a breathalyzer at the end because you have to. I mean,
you have to make sure they're not driving home.
And even if you spit, and we all spit, your alcohol gets absorbed in your mouth, so you still absorb even if you're spitting. So just something. And when we had spirit tasting, oh my gosh, you really have to be paying attention. Imagine trying to describe flavors in a sip of scotch or even vodka. It's really difficult because the alcohol is so overpowering.
Yes.
Sometimes we would dilute it a little bit with water so that you could start to taste the flavors.
I did a whiskey tour in Kentucky. That was really cool.
That was really cool.
It was at a FEMA, at a flavor and extract manufacturers meeting. And the one thing I learned from the tour and the tasting was we had one with an ice cube and without. And the ice cube made it, at least to me, more alcohol-y. He said sometimes it lifts the alcohol.
Lifts the alcohol up.
And straighter, it was smoother to me. But I know
Interesting.
everyone's probably different on that.
Everybody's probably a little bit different, and I'm sure there's some science around what it does in your mouth, but we generally tasted it straight,
Yeah.
to be honest.
And the caramel notes, like, I'd never done that before, and I'm like, I like whiskey.
Yeah. In fact, one learning.
And chocolate and whiskey is
Yeah.
really good.
Oh, it's really good.
Really good.
So when you taste wine, the best way, just for those interested, to really, for me, to learn what you're tasting is just don't taste one Pinot Noir. Taste maybe 3 or 4 different ones. It's not your normal, let's have a glass of wine, but it's really, you should do it because then you really learn the difference in the
And what you
flavors
like.
and what you like.
I think, and you know, it's fun. Sometimes I've done this with my friends of like blind tasting. You know, you can get the really, more expensive bottles versus the $5 chuck and do it blind.
Yes.
And it's kind of amazing
It's
that
fun.
sometimes
Yeah.
the cheaper one you like better.
Right. And it's really a great exercise people should do more, because you understand that you can put them in paper bags if you really want to get exciting, but you really, or black glasses, which we used to do, just so you really aren't jaded by what you're going to taste.
Right.
And it's true. What you like when you drink a glass of wine it's all up to the individual. Yeah. So you taste something different than I taste, but that's what makes it so unique. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so the story I was going to tell you is when we understood that some people just don't like Chardonnay, the question you ask as a scientist is, how can I get those people to like Chardonnay? And when you put a wine or like Chardonnay in the presence of oak, you create a lot of extraction from the oak. Many, many compounds come out. One of them is called a pencil note. It's like, what does that taste like?
Pencil note.
But it's a note you get in Chardonnay that we know people don't like. So we extracted oak, took out that pencil note, put that alcohol back into the wine, and Wine Spectator tasted, someone at Wine Spectator, won't say his name, tasted it and said, I just tasted a Chardonnay from Gallo. I love this. And it was technology and science coming together.
Art and science.
Art and science. And that's what food science can do, because you take the engineering and you marry it with the ingredient, and you think about it and you try different things. Yeah. And you can come up with something that fits the definition of wine.
That is very cool.
So it was cool.
Yes, we are the coolest industry by far.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then I got my husband and I in Modesto, small town in California, but we loved it a lot. We adopted our second daughter.
Nice.
So that was exciting. So now we had two, and we were living in Modesto, and I got to know the Mars family through the Gallo family, because they're family businesses.
Yes.
And family businesses like yours
Yes.
talk to other family businesses.
And chocolate and wine go well together.
Chocolate and wine go well
Mars
together.
And Gallo should be friends.
So I got to know Frank Mars, and he had an opening for a business head, a general manager, to run Healthy Cocoa. His business, it was Healthy Cocoa Flavanols. They wanted to make supplements, nutritional supplements, come up with a label for that, a health claim for that. And so my husband and I decided to leave Gallo, and we went to Mars, moved to Washington.
This has got to be Frank Jr.
Frank
Right.
Jr.
Did you ever read Emperors of Chocolate?
I've read many of those books.
That one is fun. It's the Mars Hershey story.
Yeah. Yep.
And so it's been years since I've read that, but I always found it really interesting about there was, friendship. I mean, their kids would swap, and some Hershey kids would be at Mars working in interns. And
there's always the positive. People want to know more about family businesses.
Because they're so interesting.
They're so interesting.
Drama.
There's drama. And
movies.
So 2 books. One
Succession. How about do you watch Succession?
No, but I know it's got to be similar to what we're talking about. So at Gallo, there's a book before I went. I read Blood and Wine. It's about the family, and it was, of course, it's written by someone who's not a family member, but it tells you the negative side of a lot of things. I don't know if I didn't believe all of them, but some of them are probably true. Mm-hmm. And then Crisis in Candyland was the one I read before I went to Mars. Mm-hmm. And again, you read all the good and bad, a lot of negative because it's sensational, but I didn't find that at all. I found them, both families are wonderful families.
Nice.
And were very good to us, so I can't say anything about either one. And then, so I worked with Frank closely. It was a small business, and we developed our supplement products, drinks actually, that would use this cocoa flavanol. Mm-hmm. We got a structure function claim through the government, which means that if you would drink this cocoa drink every day, you could improve your circulation, because as you age, your arteries get hard like pipes, and they lose their flexibility. But if you take in the supplement, the cocoa flavanols, they stay flexible.
Interesting.
It's really interesting, and plaque doesn't stick. So we learned a lot, and so we had a structure function claim, and I've turned a lot of folks onto this drink, and they still drink it today. So you just take it every day. You can put it in your coffee. It doesn't have to taste like cocoa. It can taste like strawberry. We can formulate it any way we want. Okay. But it's really healthy, so it's a good thing to know.
All right.
And then I ran the cocoa operation in Indonesia for Mars, because it was connected to the Healthy Cocoa Flavanol technical process. Mm-hmm. And I had a call one day when I was in Indonesia from Starbucks.
Wow.
And I had met Howard Schultz at one time. And so they needed...
And as long as we've known each other, and I still have yet to meet him, Mary, so there's that. Because I think he is amazing. I've read all his books.
He's amazing. I worked with some fabulous leaders, and I will
really
never write a
have.
book on all this, but he is an amazing person. He just has the passion. He believes in what he's doing. He brought it to the world. He brought coffee to the world.
Purpose.
He believes in, we called it the third place. There's home, there's work, and then there's the third place, which is Starbucks. And
Community, connecting.
community and connection. It's all connection.
Brilliant.
So we developed, the last thing we did was nitro cold brew before I left. And
We were
egg
talking
bites,
about that
egg
today.
bites,
Nitro cold brew. You got some fans in the
I see
audience
that.
out here that love nitro cold.
But you
Talk about mouthfeel
mouthfeel.
in nitro cold brew.
Yes. So mouthfeel, I get so excited, stop me. But you can have,
Food science nerd, and I love
you know,
it.
when you drink a soda, you get carbonation from CO2, carbon dioxide. It bounces on your tongue, but their bubbles are pretty big. Champagne is very tiny bubbles, and you know what that feels like on your tongue.
I do too much, but yeah.
Yeah, but nitrogen has a very soft, the bubble size all plays into this texture in your mouth. So it almost tastes like a Guinness when you drink a nitrogenated cold brew. And there's no ice. It's just a very smooth drink.
And there's no cream.
It's
which
not as bitter to me.
To me too, no cream. It tastes like there's cream in it, but there's no cream.
Right. So it's a great product. And we had to learn how to put a nitrogenator, I'll call it, into each store. When you think about handling cylinders of gas and you have 16-year-olds, it's not intuitive that how you're ever going to do that. So it's dangerous. So we had to figure out how to move canisters in the store, how to hook it up so that it would flow and you could replace a canister easily. And the cold brew is made separately, and then you had to bring them together in a stream. So it's not intuitive how you do it, but you learn from Yum Brands and how we did it, and you learn from different venues, and it all comes together.
So you kind of touched on this, but I want you to expand a little bit more on the difference, because you've worked for publicly traded businesses and families. So maybe speak to it from a culture standpoint, or, just what were the different feelings that you had?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I get asked that question a lot. Like, how would you compare family businesses, private to public? And I've worked for great leaders in both. So I think Schultz is a great example of a great leader in a public company. Frank Mars, Joe Gallo, great leaders in private. The difference is, in a private business, my impression is that you have a lot more freedom. If you want to try something innovative, if you want to spend $10 million and try it, you can do it. In a public company, there's a lot more scrutiny because the dollars, you have to turn a profit, you have to show a profit, your shareholders expect it. A family is, if you want to spend it, you can. Mm-hmm. You may not have as much money this year coming to the shareholders, but you have done what you wanted to do. Mm-hmm. So that's the big difference when you work there.
And longer term view,
right, you're in it for the long haul.
You could, I'm sure if it's public, it's like, okay, maybe you can take X amount of risk, but you better get a return in a year or 2 or 3, where maybe private is like, okay, we need a return in 5, or,
right. Well, you have to prove the business case if you want to do something in public. The bigger the company, probably, I know that. The bigger the company, the more scrutiny, because everybody is fighting for dollars. But when you're in a private company and the owner wants to make a difference, like you can make that decision, and it is so. Mm-hmm. And people will line up and make it happen. So a lot of passion in public companies, a lot of passion in private companies. Mm-hmm. And I think that touch with the private owner makes it it's hard to even talk about how that compares at times. I would walk in a factory with Frank Mars or Joe Gallo. It's like you're with a rock star.
Yeah, but Howard's a rock star too.
Well, that is. But I can think of other places where it wasn't always a rock star, but Howard was a rock star too.
Yes.
He'd walk in any kind of store.
And what kind of traits would you describe of that? Like, what made people so drawn to all three of them,
Their connection with people.
Yes.
Their ability to care about people. True leader has the traits of taking care of their people because they treat their people like family. They know how important they are to the success of the business. So a good leader and you could see that with all three of them for sure. They would just, you're the only one in the room when they come in and talk to you. And they're sincere about wanting to know. I've seen all three of them do things for employees that you normally would never see. They lost their house, or they had a crisis, or their child has a situation, and they'll just drop everything.
Wow.
All three of them. So private and public there, it blurs a bit.
That's cool. I think he's probably unique in that way.
It's unique.
But he's very unique.
Right.
That is really cool. So when you went to Starbucks, I know that you commuted for many years.
Yes. So
that was huge.
That was huge. Like you, in your role, I think women, especially, I'll say my generation, and yours a little bit.
Yes, totally.
We had to, it's not intuitive that you could work, have a family, continue to grow in your profession. It was just harder. My husband stayed home. We adopted children. We chose the life we chose. He does all the finances at home. He manages the household. I brought in the money. He managed the money. So we have this dance that we do that's worked for us for 35 years.
That's congratulations.
Yeah, you have to get, I think for a woman, you have to find someone, if it's not a partner, someone who's going to support you, to help you through all the things because you can't get them all done yourself.
No.
So I commuted, and I would leave work at Starbucks on a Friday at noon. I would fly to Washington, D.C. from Seattle. I would...
Which is how long of a flight? 6 hours?
About 6 hours.
6-hour flight. That's not like a 2-hour flight.
Right. It's a long flight. So I'd work on the plane, get there at night. I wouldn't leave till Monday morning, and I came back to Seattle. And so I got a lot done on the planes, because you want to be home when you're home.
Right.
And
talk about that. I think that's a really important and good advice, especially for young emerging leaders, men or women, of being in the moment. How did you accomplish that? I think, and how do your girls feel?
I think it's a challenge it just level set. It's a challenge to do that. You take the moment, like you said, you be in the moment, because it is so different than maybe what their kids' parents do or what they would like you to be doing. But you're there to reinforce them. You're always there if they have to call you, if you're not physically there. So you try to make it the norm for us. And that's what we did. We still entertained on the weekends. We would have people over and families over. So you make it as normal on the weekend. And during the week, I justified in my head, which you have to do if you're the female or the male, is I'm doing this, I'm gone for a reason, I'm giving it my best, but I'm still, half my brain is back at home. I mean, you can't, it's hard to separate sometimes, but, and then you have crises that come up at home, then you have to go home. Right. So it just depends on the nature of it. I think today I thought by this time in my career, we would have made further advancements, especially for people with young families. And I think we're getting there, but we're not there yet.
I agree. And
we're not there yet.
We just changed a bunch of policies at Edlong, and have a lovely chief people officer named Sue Pills, and she and her team made some recommendations to our executive leadership team that I was like, of course, just great ideas around paternity leave. I mean, paternity leave back in our era, I think my ex-husband had 3 days on, and I know you didn't even take a maternity leave when you were.
I didn't.
That is, yeah. And now you probably, I think young women would, and young dads, and but I think it's getting better. But I think I agree. We have a long way to go.
And COVID didn't help us. I think now we have the dilemma that people want to work from home, and some jobs require that you do go in still. I think it's changed. It's changing so much. You may want to work from home, and you may move to a really inexpensive city to live and work from home. Then you don't get the salary that you might have when you stayed in a
really good point.
Higher rent city.
Really
so
good
it's so dynamic right now.
And that's right in my mind. I mean, if you're going to move to I don't know, whatever, Oklahoma, I'm just guessing, or whatever, that, or even another country, like companies that have multinational locations, you have to adhere to the country that you're in.
You do.
You can't mess with an entire economy.
So you can't take what happens in the U.S. and necessarily think that's so over in the U.K., for instance.
Right.
So it's still
Mexico.
We're in an interesting time for women, especially, but also men. As you grow in your career, what I did isn't you moving every 7 years isn't what you necessarily have to do now. But you're going to have to make sacrifice in some other form. And the thing I would hope, as I see this, and because I'm on boards now and I work with a lot of the women in the businesses, that you don't want to sacrifice yourself, because I did then in some ways. In women, I see them sacrificing, activities now, like their health. They don't have time in the day; they just skip it, and you have to really pay attention to yourself. And that hasn't changed. You have to still find time for yourself, mentally, physically, all that.
Yeah, and who are the sacrifices for? I think finding the quiet, even in the day, to figure out, where do I get my joy?
Right.
And where is my energy best spent?
But I commuted because my kids, we wanted our oldest to finish high school. So that's
that
important.
Was for her.
That was very important.
Very important. You hear, I moved one of my kids when he was a sophomore in high school. I still haven't heard the end of it, and he's 33 now. So
I don't think you're ever going to hear that because we moved our younger one, and it's a challenge. But
it really is.
But it is an interesting time to be in our profession, or to even be in business. If you're female or male, I'll say I mentor both. So
I just recently saw a video that one of my colleagues shared, and it is a book that I'm blanking the name of at this moment, but it's around that men are kind of lost right now. It was really, and it wasn't a us and them kind of video or book. It's around, we need each other. And this is the first time in history, according to this author, that, I think it's 40% of women are the breadwinners in their family. And it happened fast. And now, sadly, men are like, what's my role? And you and I both know there's a role as a father. I mean, to be a good mother, we need a father on the other side of it, and we need support. Might not need money support, but we need support, emotional support. And I just did, like, listening to this video on this book, it made me, and being the mother of 5 boys, this is important stuff. And it's different for them now. And how do you mentor the men that you mentor? I don't know if it ever gets into that kind of stuff of, how they feel purpose and how they feel like what their value is. And, does any of that ever come up, or is it more on the business side and not really the relationship or family side?
I think both come up. And what I notice is when I mentor young men, they often show up with their partner. So they want to talk because they look at themselves as a unit. And I think it's really much more progressive perhaps than when we were coming up through it. They do. So while we're talking, sometimes the woman holds a baby, sometimes a man holds a baby, but it's just they look like a unit. And I think younger people coming up are more, if they're in a relationship, they seem to share this whatever they do.
The duties.
The decision, the duties. I see that more than I have in the past. But what I enjoy is from my board work, I get to mix with people my age, younger, but older men typically on boards. And I find that they're curious to start with, but after a while, they don't notice that you're not part of them, part of this thing that we're doing on a board together. I mean, we exchange information. Having a woman on the board is not a strange thing. Whereas in the old days, not that long ago, it was mainly men on boards, but now there's more women on boards. Makes sense, right? We're over at least 50% of the population working.
Yeah.
It was going to happen that we'd all get up to that level sooner or later. So it's just a natural evolution, but
not as novel as it used to be. That's great, that it's not as novel as it used to be. And I was saying that in the Flavor and Extract Manufacturers Association board, that
good example.
I am not, not the first, and the past president was a woman, so this is becoming more and more.
Yeah, The
which
first is
good.
hard.
The first is
I was the
hard.
first female president of the Institute of Food Technologists.
That's
That was
huge.
being the first is never easy.
You're a trailblazer.
Well, so are you.
Yeah, thank you.
You know, to be a CEO in a field that requires operations and to understand the dynamics of sale and the economy for the food industry. I mean, it all comes together for you.
Yeah.
And in the past, they may not have thought of you in that position, especially if you come in and, you know, dress like you do. It's like, what did they expect? I don't know. But it gets attention, and now they don't see that anymore. They don't look at you for what you look like. They look at you for what you're bringing to the party.
This is my mom gave me those wise words when I was very young. Lots of wise words, but yeah, very much on, it's not looks, you know, it's definitely, you have to have intelligence.
Right.
She was a big believer in education and learning, and like a lifelong learner. And it's so true. You know, whatever you love, I mean, find that, whatever it is. And that's why I need to go back to Harvard.
Right. Well, you do. And why we're so lucky that we had mothers that were strong like that, because my mother, who was born in 1915, she could have been anything, probably a CEO of any company, and she was a teacher because women were teachers or nurses. So she was a teacher for 45 years. I don't think she was a really good teacher, 5th grade, but I don't think that would have been her first choice in career. So I think we are very fortunate. That's what I mean when I say things are changing. Things have changed for us, and they'll continue to change, not as fast as I would have liked to have seen, but it's way different than it was when she was my age.
Right. My mom felt like, growing up Catholic, it was just have babies.
Yep.
And there was not really a career path at
Well,
that
even
time.
if you had a baby, you had to quit working.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then my mom had to quit working, and then she could come back after the kids were older.
Yeah.
They just made you quit. So that's
have come a
changed.
long way.
We have
but
come a
it's
long ways.
hard. But like you're saying, I mean, the sacrifices that have to be made in order to do it, that's what we got to work on. That it's not, such mother guilt and the things that we have to go through. But I'm curious, how do your girls feel now? Like, do they ever say anything like, wow, Mom, we're so proud of you? Or I'm sure they do. But, you're a great role model for them. And sometimes I think that gets me through too.
Yeah.
To help for my boys, even knowing I want them to see all aspects of me.
I think our kids are lucky because we have a Rolodex that if they wanted to try something, if they wanted to go somewhere, we could probably find someone to help them.
Yes.
I think
like Garrett stayed with you for that.
Yes,
was so cute.
yes.
So yes.
Yes, he was outstanding young intern.
He was. I'm like, you're getting to stay with Mary Wagner.
Oh, and he
in
stayed at our
Seattle.
house.
Oh
Yes.
my God. And then he's texting me, Howard Schultz is right in front of me. I'm like, you asshole. I haven't even met him yet. And he's like, that was a great experience. But you're right. And we love to help.
Yeah, we love to
guys.
help. So we help our kids. But what I find is my girls are pretty independent, and so they want help only to a point, and maybe they don't want it at all. So don't do it unless they ask you.
Yes.
So you learn, and I think that they are very strong-willed. I think they're proud of some of the things that they don't understand. All the things we've done, but I got a birthday card from my youngest, and the front says, "To the baddest ass I know." So there you go.
Love that.
I mean, okay. I guess
you
that's a
frame that?
compliment.
Frame that.
No, but I kept it.
It's a good one.
But I'd like to think I'm to the kindest mother. Most
Badass is way better.
selfless. Yeah, no. So that's okay. You gotta. They're great. I'd put them up against anybody in their own personality. They're not like me. Right. They're better than me in so many ways.
Right. And, they're all different. And I think that's our role as mothers, is to let them be who they are, which my mom taught me really well, that unconditional support, love, and be yourself, Mm-hmm. And same with employees, I strive to do that.
Yeah, you're really good at what you do, and because I've worked with you and I've interacted with a lot of employees that have worked for you, and with you, I think that you've done a great job and are a great role model. And we need more like you. And speaking up like this in the food industry or whatever industry, the skills are functional anywhere. You really have to speak out, because if we don't speak out, people don't understand. It has changed quite a bit, and there's still more to go. We know what the issues are. We're dealing with them. We're trying to work through them as quickly as we can in the capacity we have. I do it from my board position. I'm involved with Washington STEM, and you're involved in STEM.
Right.
I work in Rotary in Seattle with youth, trying to figure out the disadvantaged youth primarily who don't have any ability to understand even how to apply. So we spend time with them. Every place you can, you have to plug it in, and hopefully we're making it better.
And I think that's a really good point on our industry, that we both kind of strive for this, I know, of STEM, but also just the food industry in general. I know when I went to Purdue a million years ago now, graduated in 92, that in our program, not much talk, if any, about flavor, for example. And that was like way at the very, very end on your senior project. Oh, if you want to use some flavors in your project, here's a bucket of, samples that you can like pick from. But even that industry, getting younger to the 6th to 8th grade to high school students, of knowing that our industry exists, because there's a million things you could do in the food industry. And awareness. How do we bring more awareness to these youngins?
I think we need to open our doors for them in places or venues where they can come in, like the Culinary Institute of America, having a coursework developed to take into the school system. There's one experiment where you light a Cheeto and you calculate how long it burns, because the oil in the Cheeto, burns for a long time, and then you can calculate the calories in that Cheeto.
That's so fun.
It's fun experiments that these kids can
get you.
Get
I
excited.
loved physics in high school because it was like being on the roof and dropping stuff off. Like, how fun was that? And I had the best teacher. I mean, he was so good. Yes, that's a great.
So bringing education
and making it fun.
Making it fun. So this is chemistry. This is cooking. This is food, but you can do it with oil or petroleum or anything. But you're showing them what happens. So bringing it to the classroom.
Them curious.
Offering up internships, opportunities to come in like you do, for them to come and learn. Shadowing opportunities. We just have to. I used to take a group of girls from Girls Inc. when I was on the national board to our Institute of Food Technologists annual meeting. I would raise the money every year. I would take the girls. I would take them on the trade show floor so they could
I was with you on
taste all the samples and
it was.
interface.
I loved it. I do remember this one, Mary. I don't know if you were there, but Ed Long participated in the Girls Inc. project with you at IFT, Institute of Food Technologists, and there was one young woman, and we were doing sensory. She couldn't taste anything.
Right.
Nothing. And I was like, honey, the food industry probably isn't for you. Maybe aspects of quality control where you're doing testing and you don't have to taste, but I've never seen anybody that couldn't taste like anything.
Yeah. And you want to say maybe it's a bad day, but
yeah,
you've got to be able
but
to.
But it's good to know that young.
Right. Well, and
it's a God-given talent that I don't have to be a flavorist or to, it truly is a God-given talent. And some people are off the charts tasters and
but even like what you like and don't like wine.
Yes.
You may like one type of wine, not another, but tasting it's a machine. Your mouth becomes a machine in a way when you do taste.
Right.
And that was probably, I'm sure I was there when that happened.
Yeah. But it was so fun. It was so fun to get to know the girls. Like, I loved that program that you did. And like, exactly. I think that's it. It's not only girls, the guys too, but like bringing the youngins to know. It's a great industry, and it's just nice people.
Right.
Really nice people.
I think the
feed the world.
When I feed the world, and when you're working though, I think when you do interview for a job in the food industry, and let's say you're interviewing at a Starbucks and you're doing great, and then you tell me you don't like coffee, so you have to know when to speak up.
That is so true.
It's true. Or you get someone who doesn't eat meat, and
you're not going to like that job. You're just generally not going to like that job
because you're going to have to. Or I don't drink. Well, you're going to have to taste wine,
right?
So you can. You just have to be upfront. Think about it before you get into it. Even in pet care, I'll be honest, because Mars is bigger in pet care than candy.
Yeah.
People who work in pet care
and don't like animals.
They taste the food. So
you
open a can
it's supposed to be the most regulated food I've heard in the world.
Correct.
I mean, more than food.
And so that's part of food science is you taste the food and you spit it out, but you're tasting because a lot of people, believe it or not, before they feed their pets are like their kids, will taste the food.
Right.
So you need to make sure that you taste the food when you develop it. It's just things you didn't think about.
So true. And I mean, it's true. I mean, even in a flavor applications lab, there's times I remember being pregnant particularly and having to taste like straight up different oils.
Ooh, that'd be tough.
It's bad. It's
Yeah,
bad.
that'd be tough.
So I'm having a flashback of one of our memories of one of our times together. Speaking of the Culinary Institute of America, which is one of our faves too.
Right,
I love
right.
them. And we were in Napa at their beautiful site, and you were one of the speakers on a panel. I think it was Future Food Tech. And I'll never forget that, Mary. And you were talking, I can't even exactly remember you were on what you guys were talking about. There was a heckler or two in the audience.
Oh, yeah.
As happens to our industry. And they were saying something around the frappuccinos and how much sugar is in a Starbucks frap. And like, I remember sitting there, I was ready to like punch him. I'm like,
Right.
don't be mean to my friend. She's up there on a panel. But you handled it with such grace and science and calm. Like, I was so impressed. So I guess maybe advice on, how we defend our industry. What's your feelings on
That's
that?
a good idea. I think that, that's a situation where that particular situation is when your mind is thinking about how you're going to respond, but how you'd like to respond and what you do say are sometimes two different things. But that's one thing. But I think that defending our industry, the more we know about science, the more we're going to be able to affect change. So we work on reducing sugar in things like Frappuccino. We work on reducing, or increasing fiber in things like cereal. With technology and understanding more processing, you can make change, and we're doing that. One of the boards I'm on now, called the company's called Blue Nalu, and what we do is it's cell culture technology. So we're taking cells out of fish, we're growing them in a liquid culture, and then when we get all these cells, we take those cells and we form fish meat.
Wow.
So you would be eating a piece of ahi tuna and you wouldn't know it. So it's taking science now and being able to translate that through cell culture technology. So we will be able to grow protein for the masses that will reflect the fish you catch in the sea.
That is amazing. And when we were at this Future Food Tech, I don't even know how many years ago this was now, but we got to taste at that potato chips. I don't know if you remember them. But they were from the cells of a cow cheek, and then they grew these potato chips.
Like
and
cell culture.
that was the first time I had ever tried that. And that was many years ago. And how about you were mentioning the DSM for the sustainability
Right.
aspect. So talk about that a little bit. That was cool that they came up with that.
Oh, yeah. So they've come up with amazing things at DSM and lots of food companies. I'm just mentioning them because they're a European company, but they've done a lot in the world of sustainability and health and nutrition, et cetera. One of the things they did as this food company is they developed a compound that you can put in cattle feed, for instance, and it lets the less gas be produced by the cattle, which the methane is a huge issue for the air quality, and we track it with air emissions in the state of California. So to control the gas released from a cow is a big deal.
It's a very big deal.
And they've been able to reduce, through this chemical they add to the cow food, 35% of the gas production.
That's huge.
It's huge. So but that came with learning more about science and understanding through years of research how to feed it to cattle, how to make it really measure the gas production, and how to make sure it is making a difference in emissions. So it all starts kind of creating a continuum, and now they're doing it with the oceans. Hence, we're doing cell culture growth of fish. Okay,
Right.
that's interesting. When people live in the desert and they don't have access to the ocean, or the oceans get too polluted for whatever reason, plastics, et cetera, we're going to want to know how to do this.
And someone's going to come up with, and maybe they already have, of how to help with the plastics in the ocean. I feel like I've read
I think
a few things
they're
about
working on it. What happens is when you have plastic in the ocean, it breaks to tiny little micro pieces of plastic that you may not see intuitively, but they get into the fish, and that's part of the dilemma. Is it's just in the
That's not
water.
solving the problem.
You can't
then.
continually dump in the ocean like this. You can't continually do some of the things we're doing. So in the food world, we solve the problem the best we can for packaging, trying to minimize the use of packaging and make the plastic thinner, make the compounds more easily recyclable. At Starbucks, we changed the cup to a more recyclable cup.
Yeah.
And when you think about it, the dilemma we had at Starbucks was people normally take the cup to go. So if you created a piece of equipment to take the cup and reprocess it for waste, they're not going to leave it in the store. You're going to see it on the highway. You're going to see it in the
Right.
in the bins. You take it home. So we had to make it recyclable the way we could. So you think about all these things when you're in the food industry, not just
And
the
I think
food.
even back to the heckler in that audience, I was thinking we all need a moment of indulgence too. You know, like there's a moment you need a frap. There's a moment you need an ice cream cone or a little chocolate with a little saying on it that lifts you up during the day. Like I just feel like it's an and conversation. It doesn't
It is
have
an
to
and
be
conversation.
one or the other.
So we have to
And
be
options.
aware of nutrition,
Yes.
especially in today's age where diabetes is an epidemic, especially in countries you wouldn't imagine. U.S. is one, but it's not number one in the world. Some of the countries in the Mideast have, over half the population that are subject to diabetes, and so we have to be aware that we do the best we can. We're making changes, but when you take sugar out of a Frappuccino, it's not just the sweetness, it's the texture. And a Frappuccino is all about texture.
Totally.
So sugar does more than just flavor, it gives it the texture. So we have to
Functionality
figure
of
out how to
ingredients.
make that same
Salt
texture.
is another one where,
Salt's another one.
easy to take it out, but it's cheap, does a lot. Yeah, it's really hard to replace salt. And
Right.
Yeah.
It is because
that
you
modern,
could dry salt, like the source of salt that's sun-dried versus,
Yes.
solar-dried is cheaper than machine-dried, but, maybe it's not quite as available and it's more expensive.
Right.
I mean, there's all kinds of things to
I
think
think
about.
generally our intentions are in our industry are always right. We might swing the pendulum sometimes a little too far one way or the other, but I really do believe in the intentions that we know we are a part of feeding the world. And we know that this population is going to be growing and yeah, that's a lot of responsibility.
It is. Feeding, the population, which is predicted to be in the multi-billions in the relatively near future, is taking a lot of our brain space right now, because you may think, oh, you made Frappuccinos, but all the ingredients that go into that come from parts of the world that rely on selling us those ingredients, and that changes their livelihood and changes the population and their problems they're going to have. So everything's connected. It's not so straight line as people think. So we have to think about all those things, but we are working to feed the populations of the world. We are going to figure that out. We're going to make it at General Mills. I remember I was involved with a project outside of General Mills feeding a population that really needed they needed food. So we developed this cereal-based product, and it was actually going to be a soup. But they didn't want that. They don't eat that way. So you think you can develop it in our country for some other place in the world, and it's going to solve their nutrition problem. If they don't like it, they're not going to eat it.
Well,
So
Feed My Starving Children is one of my favorite charities that we really support. And they, I remember talking to the managing director of that and like trying to come up with some stuff. She's like, their stomachs are so delicate that really the Manny pack that they come up with is all that they can handle, at least until they get to a certain point. And these are usually, obviously children, but it has to be very easy to digest.
our solutions are not necessarily translatable,
Right.
and we have to be less arrogant to think they are.
Exactly.
And so that's a big part of what we do in the food industry.
Okay. So I could talk to you forever.
Yep.
But we are going to end on our usual question. Well, maybe I might want to give you a little bit of two. But so what do you think is the legacy that our generation should leave as like food heroes of this industry? So what would you like to, say that we did as leaders?
I would say that we have brought, through our positions or our capabilities or our reach, food that is enjoyable and available to a larger number of people than it normally would have been. So our generation has focused on feeding people the best way we could. Maybe we use too much sugar, maybe we use too much salt, but now we know, and we have the technology to start to change some of those things.
And value.
And value.
I would say that
We bring a lot of value to the world of food. You couldn't do what you do without food scientists.
Right.
And our legacy is like, we've taken it to this level, now we're taking it to the next level, and then those people will take it to the next level. So it's an exciting time. Cell culture, technology. We never thought about
Fermentation.
Fermentation, it's huge.
And it's old, but it's getting a new
Understanding
twist.
gut health, gut micro.
Yeah.
We didn't know that.
Yeah.
We thought yogurt would
Remember
take
the
care of everything.
food pyramid when we were in school? And then it totally flipped.
And it's going to flip again.
It will flip again.
Yes.
Okay, last question. So what is the legacy that you would like to leave behind?
Wow. That could go any direction here.
Could go any direction.
I think if I'm talking about my career, I would say my legacy would be someone's got to go first. Probably someone has to go first. Mm-hmm. You know, the first woman in that job, the first person to try this.
Yeah.
I think some first president of IFT, someone's got to go first. Yeah. But then that's done. Mm-hmm. And then the door is opened.
And you're an amazing human of putting a hand out and helping the next person. I think you are great at that and so generous with your time and your wisdom. And I really appreciate your mentoring and your friendship. And you've always been like, what do you need? You know, and
oh, ditto.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how we do that. We help each other. We rely on each other,
mm-hmm.
and you're comfortable with each other. You have to get to that point where everybody who's coming up has to have that network, has to have those friends, because it is a mashup.
It is.
And you need to make it part of your life.
Yeah.
Food industry is part of my life.
Yeah.
You too.
Me too. My whole life. Mm-hmm. And you learn a lot from those connections and those people.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank
it's been
you.
a very nice conversation.
Yes,
I
thank you for having
hope you
me.
enjoyed it too.
I have.